Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Spiritual Underground podcast. I am Dan Reeves, your host, as always. If you're just stumbling upon this podcast for the first time, I'll tell you that over the 8 years I've been doing this, a whole lot of the majority of it is 12-step recovery. That's kind of what removed the monkey off of my back. I didn't know how blind and how in a fog I was. Really, I was, I don't really believe in this term, but I was a functioning alcoholic. I held my job, I had a family, and did this stuff. And so therefore, if you have a house and two cars in the garage and a beautiful wife and a couple kids and a dog and a half yeah, well, I don't have a problem. Don't tell me I have a problem. And time came where it did finally catch up with me, and the 12 steps was my initial awakening. And then that's allowed me to delve into other things and go deeper in my own personal spirituality and various other cool stuff. I think there's a precept in the 12 steps that says that you must continue to enlarge your spiritual life. And and for a while, I had that in a tunnel under a microscope that meant like God and Western religion. And thankfully to friends, they've broadened that, and I can follow a lot of stuff into enlarging my very spirit myself, my own inner spirit, the thing that makes Dan Dan, and there's not another one like him. Not to mention actual spiritual pursuits of higher power and things like that at the same time. So it just broke the dam open for me, and this podcast started, and I'm having a blast doing it. So welcome to the show. I hope you get something out of it. If you were wanting real 12-step stuff, go back a little bit. If you want some mix up, in the past couple of years of it's been a bigger potpourri. My guest today, Eric Moyer, is the author, and I think the book just came out, Redeeming Identity.
hmm
And I've lost the tagline, and I see it behind you. Why don't you fill in the blank?
Oh, it's Redeeming Identity, Restoring the Heart of God's Design.
Yeah, there you go. How's it going today, Eric?
It is going well. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, coming from the state where everything is big.
That's what they tell me.
Yeah, it's
I,
funny
I
how we get
initially,
those things.
yeah, I initially come from the Northeast Pennsylvania, so I moved here probably over 30 years ago. My wife and I will be celebrating our 30th anniversary this coming March. So,
Awesome. Well, that's, March is, this will come out. It'll be March when this comes out, but March is tomorrow, and I can't believe that March is already here. When Grandma used to
this,
say time goes by faster and faster as you get older, I was like, old lady don't know what she's talking about. She actually knew a lot more. That stuff
yep,
comes to the surface later.
it does.
Yeah. So most of the time, I like to hear a little bit of like an origin kind of story thing of like what brought you to this where you're at today. We all have a little story, and I think ultimately that's how we communicate as humans. That's what the Bible is, a book of stories.
Yep.
Everything is communicated by story, and I like to hear people a little synopsis of people's stories.
Oh, well, thanks. No, I actually started off my career as a teacher. And actually, if you go back, it's this is all about identity. Everything that I talk about is really I have like one of those myopic focuses of one thing. And basically going all the way through high school and college, I was a music person. People actually were surprised whenever I went, instead of going into music, I went into education and math education at that. And started off as a teacher in middle school, high school, doing some college teaching. But then I kind of went into ministry for a couple of years as a missionary, and then it went back into education as a consultant and working with districts and teachers. So everything that I've done has been kind of in that education role. But as I was in ministry doing stuff, I thought God had me in one path, and I thought that I was going to be going down that path until basically God put a screeching halt on that path, closed the door and and I'm standing there going, okay, now what? And I thought that was the biggest thing that rocked my life at that point, because I was kind of like going, I have no idea where I'm going at this point. But as you said, it's the story. And it really was the impetus to looking at my life in a different direction. And God actually took me out of ministry, and I went back into educational research and got my PhD at the University of Texas, where during one of the classes, the professor, who was great, spent the entire day talking about identity and identity development and identity, the importance of identity to human functioning, basically. And something just clicked right then. It's like, this is what you have been missing. This is what you've been looking for.
Mm.
And that started a 10-year journey of really researching the intersection of identity from a psychological standpoint, but also the intersection with identity from a Christian biblical um, spiritual standpoint, religious standpoint, and where do those two intersect? Because I think from both the ministry background, it's like there's an important part to that, but then identity and identity is so important to individuals, as we all know. We all ask the question, who am I? And that defines so much of what we do and how we think and how we relate to other people that there had to be some intersection between those two. And that is what came about. And what eventually, as I was talking with people, sharing what I was finding, that different people asked me to write a book about it. And so that's where Redeeming Identity came from.
That's a big undertaking. Uh,
It was a very long undertaking, just the research, but then writing a book. I keep telling people this is like all identity. I was not a writer. I was a numbers person. I was a math teacher. I always thought numbers people and writers were two different people, and they never intersected with each other. Well, basically, God said, no, there's going to be an intersection. It's going to be you. I'm going to make you a writer, and and I've learned to enjoy the process much more than I ever did before. But yeah, it's a long process.
yeah, yeah. I have a very good friend who is an author and writes, and I watch and that's most of what he does. So I watch I see the level of time and commitment and honoring it. And it's not like for him, it's not something you sit out on the back patio and do. It's a focused event.
Hmm.
Turn off everything, shut down. Little ritual about it too. He has that he gets ready and prepares, and then the times when he
Yeah.
sits down and says, "Well, that was a flop. Couldn't generate anything today," you know. Uh,
Oh yeah, I've learned that I put in my earphones. I put on like I can't work in silence. I have to have music in the background. Can't have any words. Has to just be instrumental.
yeah,
Have my little space with my computer. And it's like, oh yeah, every writer has their thing. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So let's talk about identity a little bit, and I did read the first few pages, or I don't know, first dozen or so pages of the book as I sat out there with the sunshine on me this morning. Uh, it grabbed me really quickly, and I related to it quickly.
great. I'm glad. That's actually the biggest compliment you can tell a writer is that they open the book and it captures them and they want to keep reading. So that's a high praise. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was. It's I don't know. I'm as I said in my kind of my intro, there's things that I used to not pay any attention to in that fog of addiction and whatnot, and me. All I was concerned about was me. And when I broke open, I want to learn today. Feed my brain.
Right. So where do we start? Probably the central part, one of the big things that redeeming identity does is it takes away what, from a psychology standpoint, because that's where I'm coming from, is trying to define identity. If you ask someone, what's identity? How do you define identity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could throw some stuff out there, but
Well, And that was actually one of the things that I found is whenever you actually look for a definition, a really clear definition of what identity is, a lot of people will say, well, identity is who I am. It's like, okay, go, take me a little bit further than that. And it's like, well, it's who I am at my core. Okay, a little bit more would be helpful. So one of the things that it took me a time to figure out was what is a good definition for identity, a working definition, something that, like you said, could help people. So the definition that we came up with is identity is the set of principles, perspectives, purposes, and priorities that
Mhm.
we hold at our core that define everything that we think, feel, and do. So that's the definition that, and you haven't gotten to that chapter yet, so I'm spoiling it for you a little bit, but that's our definition. And what we do is we a lot of the times refer to that definition of identity as the four P's, because
Mhm.
that's really what define from our standpoint that whenever we say, who are we? If we take that all the way down to our core, who we are, it's defined by those four things: the principles, perspectives, purposes, and priorities.
Yeah, I'm thinking the opposite of like where I see sometimes my mind goes there. One of the things that I hear a lot, in particular in 12-step recovery and generally, is people do not feel comfortable in their own skin.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel like they fit in anywhere. They don't, and that's where that lack of identity,
Mm-hmm.
of knowing who you are and finding your true self.
Mm-hmm.
There's a million of those kinds of sayings, all wrap
Yeah.
themselves up about this particular thing, really. Who am I?
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with someone this morning, just this morning, about this idea, and you bring it up, which is really interesting, is this idea of those four P's. But then what you end up having where you get those feelings of, do you know what, I just, something's not right. And this is where a lot of the times those mental health issues come from, is that we have principles or perspectives or priorities within our identity that are actually competing against each other,
Hmm.
that are in conflict with each other. We were talking about it like there are things that someone says that they know, that they believe that this is what they should be doing. But then whenever they get into a situation and they feel something, then they react on their feelings and they end up going and doing something completely different than what they say they believe. But then they also have that conflict that they know that that is in conflict with what all of the expectations of people around them say this is how they should be doing, or this is what they should be believing, or this is what they should be doing. And so you have this situation where you have this lack of consistency. Or I mean, sometimes they use the word integrity in this sense of we have different things where I say I believe one thing, but I do something different, and that's different than the expectations. And people, no wonder people, whenever they have that type of a circumstance, they're feeling anxious. They're feeling disconnected. They're feeling like they don't fit or something's not right. Because down at their core, there's these pieces that are at there that really don't work together, that are working against each other almost.
Yeah, when that your identity is in conflict, and
Hmm.
that is going to unsettle you, and that unsettledness is a message that you should listen to delve
Exactly.
into going, okay, where's it at? A lot of workshops I've been to, we'll sit down and you'll make a list of the things that you say you care about that means something to you. And then you make the
Hmm.
list of the things you're actually doing. And then you compare those two things. And are the things that I care about actually the things I'm doing?
Yep.
In that there's I've also heard, if you want to if you want to know about somebody, watch their feet, not their mouth.
Yep.
Watch their feet. Where are they at and what are they doing?
Yeah. It's one of the premises of the book is identity is not defined by what we do. Identity defines what we do, but what we do indicates, it's an indicator
Yeah.
of what we do. So it's a great statement. It's like you watch your feet, watch their hands, watch what they're saying, and how does everything line up? Because if you see what people are doing, that's going to be the indicator, the expression of who they are. And if something's not jiving, that means that something isn't quite right on the inside that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, yeah. Just like on the internet, I see people that say they care about our local homeless community here in the Louisville
Hmm.
area. But then I also see people who are under the bridges serving food and handing out backpacks, you know. And
Hmm.
when I see that they're actually putting action behind what they care about,
Yep.
and this and we judge, that's the thing. Well, I try not to judge people on that, but we all do, and I think in the beginning
Hmm.
of it, initially upon seeing somebody, you're already setting up stuff about who I think you are. And then when you
Hmm.
begin to use your voice and say stuff, that's piling on more. And I'm gonna go, oh, yep, that's what I thought, or maybe it's not what I thought. And
Hmm.
but that when I run into people and I don't know what this, only thing I can really say is that over time, now and again, I run into somebody who just is obviously a very solid being. And I can feel that, their identity is intact.
Hmm.
I actually I have a thing where I get tingles over some people. And it's unusual. And I had a lot of conflict in my life at one point until I understood what that was. But, yeah, I want to be a guy that makes people feel that way. And you can feel when people are in conflict too. You can tell,
Oh
you
yeah.
can sense that, or I can sense it today, of that something in them isn't doing what they know
There's
they ought to be doing.
insecurity.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really it's interesting. That's what you're bringing up. I mean, it all kind of comes back to those four P's. It's the what you just talked about is that priority issue.
priorities.
Um, it's the idea of how do we make our decisions? What do I say is important? And we can say that things are important, but in the end, our priorities define what decisions we make. And so if you can say, "Oh yeah, this is really important to me." It's like my spirituality, my religion, my whatever, my relationship with God is really important to me. But you never do anything to help nurture that, to grow that, to build that. Or like you said, caring for people around the world or even in my community is really important to me. That's really a special thing. Well, you know that that's the truth if you're one of the people that is going out there and helping people that are in that situation. And you're really an active person in the process of really helping to find solutions for people who are in that homeless situation. That's when you know that that's really a priority because they're making the decision of what they are going to invest their time and everything else in is being made in doing that. But if you can say something but you never do anything, you're right. Is that really truly a priority or is it just something that you're saying because it's what everyone else is saying? It's something
Yeah,
important.
yeah. That term virtue signaling came in when
Oh
a few
yeah.
years ago, and I don't want to latch it to that because there are also some terms that get thrown and attached to certain things, and it ends up weird. Like me too, it's got a certain feeling, but it's just a couple
Yeah.
words, and if I, so
Yeah.
I try to be, but that, yeah, are you? And you see the people. I mean, like front lines of recovery, you see that conflict out loud. They
Hmm.
know this thing they're doing is awful for them and is ruining them, and yet they
Hmm.
still can't stop doing it. But their scale can go across the board. It can be
Right.
small things that you're not doing, and still can
Oh
have a
yeah.
similar kind of may not defeat you as fast, but you still have
Hmm.
that inner conflict. And I think, at least for me, when I do have those things, because we call recovery the peeling of the onion. When I peeled off
Yep.
this, well, there's this underneath of it. Oh, well. Ah, I feel good. Got that. Got that jacket off. And then, oh man. All right. Well, there's the next one, and we continue to see these, and they become less and less
Harder.
impactful. The stuff is not like defeating me the way dope and booze was at one point, but
Hmm.
I realized, hey, here's some behavior, here's something, I I know I should or shouldn't be putting action in my energy in that department. Make those
Yeah,
corrections.
it's it is a lot of I love the onion reference. I've used that reference a lot of the time. It's the but the thing that I always remind people about that onion reference, it's The outer layers are usually thin and easy to remove.
Mm, good point. Yeah.
But as you get deeper, the challenge is that those issues, those layers get deeper, get thicker, get harder to remove because they're usually deeper and more ingrained.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about identity, if you think principles or perspectives, many of those things are things that we have been building and developing and reinforcing since we were kids. And so I mean, I'm over 50 at this point. So some of those things I've been reinforcing for over 50 years.
Yeah.
If I'm identifying something that's been that ingrained, been that identified with who I am to some degree, it's going to be one very hard to identify that that's wrong. And then two, it's gonna take work and diligence and intention to change it, which is really hard.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of the time the conflict comes in because people get to a point and they go, it's like, okay, I can change up to this point, but then whenever you start touching something that's that been that ingrained in them, it gets really challenging.
Yeah, yeah, because we will sometimes we can find ourselves just grasping at it, because
Mhm.
uh well again, my background's recovery, so I tend to point off of that. There's some stuff
Yeah.
about like there's a third step that says we're going to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand him, and people go, well, if
Mhm.
I turn everything over, who am I, and like this loss of identity kind of thing of like, this is who I am. I can't
Yeah.
I can't let loose of it. I had a guest the other day when we used the onion thing that she said, I like to think about it like a wadded ball of yarn. She said, you start pulling that thread and then it gets hung up.
There
And
you go.
she said, the neatness of the onion and the uniformity of it bothers her because she said, her thoughts, and I loved it, was that, our psyche and our stuff is just way more entangled than the clean layers of onion. It's
That's
more
very
like that
true.
wadded up ball of yarn. I really liked it. I said, I'm going to be using that now.
That that's a good one. I haven't thought about that, but that's a great perspective. It's like many times those things are interconnected. But yeah, I mean, your statement about people getting very anxious about having to give up their identity, give up who they are, even little bits. I have a friend that basically has been reading through the book, and she came back at me exactly with that. And she's like, okay, so you're saying that for me to find who I am, I have to be willing to give up who I am. Yeah, that's basically it. There's an old Indian, like you said, parables. You love parables.
I
I
do.
don't know if it's an Aesop's fable or if it's an old Indian parable, but it's of a little boy who who looks in this jar and sees a penny, and he reaches down into the jar and he grabs onto the penny. But then once he grabs onto the penny, his fist, because the penny is in his fist, he can't pull it out of the jar because the mouth of the jar is too wide, and he doesn't know what to do. And he starts thinking about breaking the jar so he can get the penny. But what he's missing is that that jar is a priceless antique. And if he just let go of the penny, he could have hold of this priceless antique, but he's just holding on to dear life to
Mm.
this penny. And sometimes that seems to be the way that and I use that to talk to people about identity. It's like, do you understand what you're doing is you're holding on to this old rusted penny that is that really is of very little value. But if you let that go and and you allow God to lead you, he's going to lead you into the identity that he created for you, which is going to be of immense value.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I've never heard that one. Uh, I do like that, and you've introduced that concept into it too. And I have a little trigger because people will say I'm working on myself, and you said a minute ago, and I'm not discounting that because I understand that, and it's a weird place about like again, recovery is based on allowing and asking a higher power to
Mhm.
assist me with this, because if I could have worked on me, well, wouldn't I have done
Right.
that?
Exactly.
What about sitting around here and, specifically in our area, and I know this is not, it's, everything's a microcosm of one another, pretty much everything I
Mhm.
found that has to do with addiction is just like is a magnified version of some other thing somebody else is dealing with, or that deal of like hanging
Mhm.
on to it, not continuing to behaviors, continuing something, not being able to stop. And, uh, and that letting go, yet I still have to take the actions and do the work. But
Mhm.
without this other element of a higher power, and recovery is pretty cool in the way that we don't, a lot of people have got preconceived notions about what that means. And
Mhm.
we don't try to put one on yet, and force
Mhm.
you into a particular thing. Uh,
Right.
because I've seen it work no matter what, right? I've seen people,
Mhm.
this asking the universe for help seems, in my observation, to work as good as asking God to help.
Mhm.
I see that, but there's some energy there that's a essential point in it of turning loose of it, letting go of who I think I am, letting go of the things that aren't, letting go of all that so that I can be this rebirth type thing. The Alcoholics
Mhm.
Anonymous talks in the same language of,
Right.
we do this and we were reborn
Right.
when we do this process and do that, and it's kind of a universal thing through most of the spiritual
It
teachings.
is.
That rebirth
Yeah.
thing is, I always kind of think about like, and I've heard this and I don't know that it's true. I've never witnessed it, but like in caves from a long, long time ago in opposite sides of this earth are
Mhm.
cave drawings of something indicating a worship of something above.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
how's that happening on one end of the world and the other end of the world if there isn't something to it?
Yeah, you don't have to argue with me about believing in God.
Yeah, I
That's
knew I
actually one
didn't
of the
have to, but
premises. But yeah,
it's
I think
probably the biggest block for everybody coming into
it is.
recovery. And I'm certain that also, like I said, is that's my thing, but I'm sure it's a block for
So
anybody dealing
many.
with anybody, anything, and to some extent.
We're all searching for who we want to be, and I think your point, and I love the statement is, and you've made it several times, is you're referencing this to addiction. You're referencing this to recovery from addiction, and it's almost like we need to recognize that we're all addicted to something that is leading us in a different direction. Um,
The
the
word
gentleman I
recovery,
was,
we're all
we're
recovering,
all in recovering, right?
hopefully, or you're stuck and you're not going
Yeah.
anywhere.
Well, and I use the term in the book that we all have a corrupted identity,
Hmm.
whatever that is, whatever that corruption is. It could be that the corruption is, there's so many levels of it, but the someone may see their corrupted identity just initially as something very much at the surface, like alcoholism, drug addiction, um, or gambling addiction, or something like that. But we all have a corrupted identity. We're all searching for what is the identity that I was really meant to have, that I was really meant to live out of. So we're all searching for that. It is that level of recognizing that. And I think sometimes the people that are going through addiction, recovery, the gentleman I was working with today works in prisons and works with people who probably are going through all of the recovery aspects, but also going through other things at the same time. But they're sometimes even at a better place than others because the corrupted identity that they're at has led them to a place where it's so easy to admit that there's an issue, that there's something that they're not living the life that they were really meant to, and they
And
need
it's
to be
really
willing to get.
obvious when you're
It's
locked
really
up.
obvious. But you have a person who is a businessman or a businesswoman who has a
Mhm.
successful career or seems to have a successful career and has the family. They still have a corrupted identity. They still have things that are not, they're not living out of the identity that they were meant for, it's just not as obvious. And it's just harder for them sometimes, as like you were saying, to come to that realization and to admit it. And if you don't have anything, it's very easy to let go of that so that you could receive something great. But if you feel like you have everything that you need, it's so hard sometimes
Yeah.
to admit that and to acknowledge that.
Yeah. It's kind of that thing. Like the first step is admitting you got the problem. There's nothing to work on if you don't
Absolutely.
admit that. And that's, again, it really is the first step in the 12 steps, but it's also the first step in everything. I have to say, okay, hey,
Mhm.
this is a problem. I need help. And, the
Yeah.
other thing is I find that, we're, as humans, we weren't built to do that alone. I
Right.
must have community, mentor.
Hmm.
I got to have that help in my
Support.
life too, as well as this power, uh,
Hmm.
God, to help me do that. And
Right.
yeah, that it is a tough spot, and I was in that spot, as I said, that I thought that I could deny the problem. Really, ultimately, inside me, I knew
Hmm.
it. People looking at me, very few of them probably, I'm sure there were some that saw it, but
Hmm.
it's really easy to deny when you kind of have your stuff together in most
Oh yeah.
areas. And none of
Uh,
us are you can say, "Hey, I'm not perfect," and you can use that for an excuse to not do
yeah.
any growth or to allow something to continue in my life that's not serving me.
Hmm. And that's such a great way of thinking about it, because that idea of people saying, well, I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. Well, I know that. I understand that. And that's the condition that we're in right now. But I've asked people the questions like, but what if this isn't what you were meant for? What if what we were created for, what if we were designed for was something so much different, so much better? And what we're doing is we're missing it because we're not willing to admit that, because not just settle. And I think that that's the challenge, is that we settle for the corruption. Um, a great analogy that I love, that I actually thought about, whenever someone was asking me about how to think about this, was counterfeits, and I use that idea
Hmm.
is someone basically goes down, and I know that Canal Street up in New York is supposed to be this great place to get great counterfeits for almost anything, right?
Hmm.
So someone goes up to Canal Street and they get this counterfeit purse, and it's this counterfeit Chanel or counterfeit. I have no idea what purses are because I don't have a purse, and my wife doesn't have one of those either. So, but you come back and the person has this great counterfeit purse, and it looks good and it's functional, but it's still a counterfeit. It's still not the original. It's still not what it was meant to be. And someone saying, it's like, do you know what? If you come over here and you like, if you kind of walk with me, I'll replace that counterfeit with the real.
Yeah.
And so many times people will say, well, this one's working. It's not perfect. It's not the real. It's not what it's supposed to be, but it works. I've worked with it and I've lived with it for so long that I'm okay with it. I'm just going to settle
Yeah.
for this counterfeit.
Yeah. And then I say I'm going to do that now. I'm willing to do that with my very life. This little trip I get to be here. I'm going to settle for a counterfeit version of me that passes off into the sunset rather than having the real deal that I can get to, that is available
I
to me.
mean, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It's like when you think about it that way, it's there are so many people out there in the world because they're not willing to, like you said, that first step, admit, submit, or recognize that there's something more and that they're not there. If they'd be willing to do that and just start that first step, then they could get to the point, hopefully, that they'd be willing to let go so that they could get the full thing. But so many people are just willing to settle
Yeah.
and say, you know what, this is who I am. And they just say, this is who I am. This, and I'm just gonna settle for this version of who I am. But there's something so much more amazingly out there for them if they could just get that understanding, that vision of that.
Yeah. I had another comparison to the 12 steps, I see that
Please.
happen in the 12 steps where people will get so far in the work and that will be
Hmm.
good enough and they will stop. Hey, I got here. But like I'm like, no, do the whole thing. You're
Hmm.
going there, there's never been a person alive that worked the 12 steps and said, I wished I hadn't have done that. Never.
Right.
That doesn't exist. But they settle for less. We call it juice. Do you want the whole glass of juice? Or are you going to
Hmm.
settle for the quarter cup or half a cup or whatever?
Hmm.
And it does, I think it falls to the other thing of, that I can relate to this. I would rather I'll deal with the comfort of what I got rather than the fear of the unknown and what might come of it. That
Hmm.
Marianne Williamson quote that says, what I really fear is not, is how powerful I can be. Not,
Hmm.
I used to know it really well off the top of my head, but we do. I would
Right.
rather just stay here. We're inherently like momentum. And that's the other thing. Once you
Right.
start growing, and I love this story, I tell it all the time. There's a movie on YouTube called Finding Joe. It's based on some Joseph Campbell teachings about
Okay.
The Buddhist statue that the armies were coming and they covered it all up with mud because they didn't want the soldiers to plunder it. And centuries go by or whatever, and some kids are playing, and somebody throws a rock and it hits the Buddha, chips off a piece of the knee, the mud on the knee, and they see the gold, and they're like, "Oh,"
Oh, wow.
and start picking it off,
Oh.
and they what they say there, and I can relate to this. That's why it touches me like this is that like once I picked off a little piece of the gold on me,
Hmm.
then I just wanted to pick the rest of it off.
Yeah.
I wanted to, okay, what's next? What's the next thing I can do? Where can I get to where I'm fully, as realized, as awakened, as
Hmm.
awake, as my identity in place, being who I've had some
Where you were
moments.
meant to be. Right.
I've had some moments, and there's are probably some of the best moments ever that I can think of is when I knew for a fact I was exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly
Hmm.
what I'm supposed to be doing. And
Yep.
just saying that, the chills come on my arm, reflecting back on those moments. And then what I
Uh-huh.
want is more of those, right?
Right.
And so the momentum, but the stuckness is where I'm kind of relating to. We get stuck and we don't want to
Hmm.
move, you know?
Right.
And it usually takes some kind of pain to get people moving, to go, okay, this is hurting bad enough that I need to do something about it. My knee's acting up a little bit. I'm not going to the doctor. But after maybe a
Yeah.
week and I'm limping, then I'll go to the doctor. And the same thing we do with our own, with our
Your own identity.
being.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I was doing some research on change and leading people through change. Um, and one of the things that they said is that there's really two things that lead people to change. First one you said is pain. Is there's a discomfort. There's something that either is difficult, hard, painful, uncomfortable, something that they would like to get rid of. And that leads to the question of like, okay, what do I need to do to get rid of this pain? That's one thing. The other one is vision. The other one is if you can give people a vision of what could be better if change occurred. Because it may not be that things are uncomfortable now, but if you changed, here's how much better and different it could be. It's I love I never heard that story about the mud on the Buddha temple on the Buddhist statues, but that's such a great idea. It's like if you could just take a little chip off of that and show them, look what's underneath, look what you look who you could become if you were willing to step into this process and continue this process of transformation that you were created for. That sometimes is an even better motivator because that vision is still out there and you can continue moving through the vision. Sometimes, like you said, with the part way, the moment that the pain is gone, people stop and they think, okay, well, I'm better because I haven't had to deal with this for such a short period of time. But many times what they find in those types of situations is fast forward 3 years. Where are they at that point? Because they didn't have anything that was moving them continually forward. They sometimes slip back.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part because they didn't really see who they were becoming and kept moving towards it. So they fell right back into the old ruts that they had previously.
Yeah, yep, it does, and it happens. It happens
Way too
often.
often.
Settle, yeah, and that's and like I said, I could just see so much of like how it works in 12-step communities. And then I try to branch
Mhm.
my mind out from that because I am my most recent sponsor has written a book and we've got some groups here. We're offering the 12-step tools to anybody who wants them. You don't have to be an
Mhm.
alcoholic, an addict, or whatever we say.
Yeah,
We say, I am one too. Instead of, hi, I'm Dan, I'm alcoholic. I am one too. I'm just a human here trying to be a
there
better
you go.
version of myself tomorrow. And your problem doesn't have to match mine. Now, understand the value of when we all have a common problem that we're working on too. I
Hmm.
understand, but I know that's also not a limitation. That's
Yeah.
not a hard line in the sand that we allow these people. But if you do, that's really the risk is that if you don't like finish this work, it's a unbelievable high percentage that you will relapse and be back where you were. Maybe probably
Hmm.
worse. The book says is you'll be it's always worse, never better
Right.
when we go backwards. It never improves going backwards.
Yeah. And because there's so much of the mental health aspect of that is you're back where you were, and then when you realize that there's an additional depression aspect to that layers on, it's like I thought that I had escaped this and I hadn't. And then there's this almost like either depression or shame component that comes upon it. And we feel even worse than we did previously because we are back where we were. Plus, we knew that we had gotten away from it, but we never dealt with the inner issue, the
Yep.
identity issue that needed to be transformed to so that we wouldn't go back and we didn't replace it. That's one of the things that we talk about is this, and I know that this is part of the 12-step process, is this idea of not only admitting that you have an issue, but then you have to we call it submit. We're because we're putting the religious, the God focus on it. We're submitting to God that He has shown us that there's something that needs to be worked on. Then we're sacrificing that. We're putting that thing to death. We're letting go of that, but then we're replacing it. We're substituting something new for that. We're substituting for those four P's. We're letting go of an old purpose and we're putting in a new purpose.
Yeah,
And
because the old thing, nature abhors a vacuum. It will fill it with something, and you, or at least in my, I try not to do the you should.
right, no,
I
I get it.
had to put something healthy in its place
Hmm.
to take that up. That was, and sometimes that happens organically just by doing the work, and sometimes
Right,
you actually have to like say, okay, I'm going to start doing this instead of that. Because if you just
right.
leave that hole empty, something's going to pour back into it and it's probably going to be your old pattern.
And many times it's the old pattern because you never really, if you put it to death, you let it go, there is something that God wants to replace it with, but you have to let Him replace it.
Yep.
Put that, give you that new way of thinking, that new perspective, that new belief, that new purpose, that new priority, whatever that is. But that's the part of the process is you just can't admit that you're something's wrong and then say I'm going to put it to death. You have to replace it with who were you really meant to be? What direction were you really supposed to be going? And that's that we're supposed to be making progress. And if you put to death, you're still in the same location. The progress is the new thing, is the
Yeah.
taking the step closer to where you what you were who were you meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, the Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step stuff was started by a 1930s New Yorker, so it's all
Mhm.
Western God, Christianity, Catholicism type of based
Right.
underneath of it. That's why
Yeah.
we've kind of expanded upon it to try and open the door wider. And
Right.
sometimes I joke around and I can get into some trouble with 12-step community because there's some people that say, And that's the problem I had, my vision on religion growing up was that it was like this line, and I understand also the path is narrow stuff. I do get, stuff is just isn't, there's just nothing black and white,
Mm-hmm.
at least I don't think. Uh, and I've seen it but experience. But anyway, where I was going with this is we kind of tricked you into believing in God. We don't sell it to you right out of the gates, although the word's there here and there. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, your idea of God and mine, the world fights over that. I think we're maybe fighting over that right this very moment somewhere
Mm-hmm.
on whose thoughts are right and whose thoughts are wrong. But it's, like the seventh step, I have to ask God to remove this stuff from me. That's what the seventh
Mm-hmm.
step is. It's a prayer. It is saying, I can't take this away.
Right.
I'm laying this at your feet. I need
Yep.
your help to remove this stuff. And we also, some of the lead up to that is like getting it on paper so that you see, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because if I just go out and say, God help me, and that's
Oh yeah,
good,
that's not
that's
specific enough.
great too,
Right.
but when I like have okay, here are my deficiencies, here's my defects, my character defects, and this stuff, that's kind of what we call them. And there's a few different terms for it. But when I have that material and I say, here's what my old patterns are that I want to stop, I want removed from me, and then go into that prayer work to ask for that, and I watch it work. I see it
Mm-hmm.
work. It's not the more thing like to say is that the evidence piled up that beyond what I could deny anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You look back and look
Oh
at
yeah.
the pile of evidence, and it's like, well, well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I can't, but I wanted to, in a big piece of my life, I did want to deny that. Even though now today I can see where God's been working in my life from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
there's a point in time when I thought that happened when I got sober. God said, okay, Dan,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be here with you now that you've stopped that. Uh, and, uh, and
And
I've had relapse in my life, and there was a piece of time when I thought like God was going to drop me off like a bus stop, like,
yeah.
kick me off the bus when I'm not doing perfect. That's where I'm getting in that perfect line type of stuff about the black and
Mm-hmm.
white stuff. If I'm not
Yeah.
walking that line perfectly, God will kick me off the bus and there I'll be. And, and I found that not to be true. My little thing that come to me one night in prayer meditation was, God's not punishing me. I'm punishing me. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
one punishing me over this.
Yeah.
God is still providing blessings. God is still giving me opportunities, laying out a path, showing me where to go.
Yeah.
Now I just got to get back to listening and
Well,
doing.
yeah, and that one of a couple of things that I respond to is in the Bible, one of the verses that I love, and I think a lot of people quote, is that God works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And I think what you said is right there is we don't always recognize it. And many times we won't recognize it until much further down the road. But many times the people that if God is working in your life, and which he wants to, he is going to work all the different things, the good things, the bad things, the difficult things. Sometimes he will allow difficult things in our lives for a purpose to help us to see that those things are not good and that we need to sometimes let them go. So God is working all of the different things for the good, for the purpose of helping us become who he has created us to be. And in the beginning, it may not be that a person is going, okay, I believe specifically in the God of the Bible. I'm not going to, but it just may be that they're saying, it's like, okay, I know that there's a God. I don't got this right. I'm going to trust that that God is good enough that he's going to show me how where I need to go. And that may be and that's sometimes just enough to get us to start us on that path. And then God is going to be faithful to do what he needs to do to help us walk down that path. And that's part of I think what you're talking about is we don't always know which direction or what he's going to use or how he's going to do it. but many times we just end up in a point of faith, of trusting that He is working, and that even though this may be difficult, this may be really challenging. I don't understand why I'm in this circumstance. The guy that I was talking with earlier this morning, who does ministry in prisons, he has to have this conversation with these guys. It's like they're going, okay, why am I here? It's like, okay, can you come to the point that you recognize that maybe God has taken away everything else in your life at this point because He wants you to just depend on Him? And this may be the point that you need to make a decision. Are you going to go in that direction or not?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I got in a lot of trouble and I was looking at prison time. And prior, that was my rollover point and what, that bottom we call it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up being spared from that. But what I did have was a year of home incarceration. And and again, I hear this over and over to uh, on exactly what you were saying today. What looked like was the worst thing could ever have happened to me turned out to be
Mm-hmm.
the best thing that could ever happen to me,
Yep.
and over and over. So like that also is evidence today that when I run against something tough, now they didn't come off of one time.
Oh
I don't
no.
learn off one, but a few, they come and I'll have this evidence behind me that when I bump up against something difficult in life, I can move into it cleaner and knowing that, okay, this is here for some reason. Let's walk through it. We'll see what it
Mm-hmm.
is later. And, that piece of home incarceration today, I saw, what did? God took everything out of my way. You know what the home incarceration people would let me do? They'd let me go to meetings, AA meetings.
Mm-hmm.
They let me go to work and they let me take my kids to points A and B when they had to go to dance or scouts or whatever. And those are the only three things that were now in my life. Everything else,
Mm-hmm.
now, I always like I have the ability to ruin an amble with a toothpick if I try hard enough. So I could have messed that up, but the opportunity was given to me and and I see it in the rearview mirror. I didn't see it when it was
Mm-hmm.
happening. I looked back and went, "Hey, look at that." Everything was removed out of my path for a little while so that I could focus on this and also at the same time kind of keep the fires out, continue to make money so that I could pay bills,
Mm-hmm.
continue to make sure my kids were getting where they needed to be. But what
Mm-hmm.
everything else was put up, I could go to all the recovery meetings I wanted to. And so that beat sitting in the house.
Yeah, it does.
uh,
But I
and they
think
let me
that
go to church.
there you go. But I think that that goes to the other thing that you said earlier is that this process of re redeeming. I mean, my book is redeeming identity. So it's like I use that term. It's like this process of redeeming is a process that we're not also meant to do alone. And I think that that's a great point that you made is that the whenever God took everything else away, He still allowed you to come to a place where there were people around there who could support you,
Yeah.
who could be encouraging, who could be examples. I know that a lot of the times in the 12-step process, there is a mentor that you're
Sure.
supposed to have, that is someone that is further along the path than you. That's been going down this path. Maybe has had their ups and downs and their successes and their failures, and they recognize that. Do you know what? A relapse doesn't mean failure. It just means that you have a little bit more work to do. And you have to be willing to not go back into shame, but show a little bit of grace to yourself.
Yeah.
And we need that. We need other people who are a little further down the path of becoming who they were meant to be to help us realize that we're not there yet either. And if they can be on that path and they can be successful in that journey, then we can also continue in that journey as well.
Yeah, that comes into the vision, that was something for
Hmm.
me that I saw people who were having great lives and that had telling stories of where they were in my situation at some point, and now
Right.
they are plainly not, so that
Hmm.
gives me the hope and the vision that I can get from where I'm at to there. And then basically step 12 is being that mentor mostly. That is where it kind of
Hmm.
turns around. That's when people don't finish. And because that's like it, that's we kind of call it an insurance policy. If I continue to go, there's no saying about like if you make it out of hell, you're supposed to grab a bucket of water and go back and help other people out. Uh, that's kind of what we do. And
Hmm.
that keeps one thing it does, all alcoholics have a forgetter that works real good. I kind of forget
Hmm.
that have that problem. And when I'm continuing to go back and serve people and help them pull out of it, that like keeps it green for me because I
Right.
continually to expose myself to what that used to be, and I'm reminded of
Yeah.
where I used to be. And
Yeah.
and then the other little piece of it is that we always say, and it's a little it sounds a little cliche sometimes, but there's a ton of times where that new guy's helping me more than I'm helping him. Like I can,
Oh yeah.
he doesn't really know it, he won't feel it, but I'm seeing things in his life as a mirror to mine, and going,
Hmm.
hmm, okay. I do this all the time. I do. I cast my eyes up. I go, okay,
I
I hear
get it.
you. Uh,
It's such an amazing thing from being someone who actually is trying to coach and help people at this point. I mean, you're in that same point doing this with this podcast, which I think is amazing, which is great, is you learn so much more from teaching.
you do.
You learn so much more from helping other people because when they have questions that they have, that may have been a question that you never really asked, but you need to now think about that so you can help them find an answer to that. But like you also said, sometimes they may be struggling through something and you're remembering that the time that you struggled through that. And that gives you, especially that vision that you said, that remembrance of remember from where you came. And now look at where you have come and who you have become. And that gives both encouragement to you that this is how far you have come, but that also has given you a new purpose. And I think that that's the other piece of that. And it goes back to those four P's, that purpose part. It's now you're no longer, many times, people who are in addiction, who are in recovery, are many times very self focused. And now, if you get to that 12th step and now you're coming back and you're mentoring other people, your purpose has now switched. It's no longer about me. It's now I'm serving other people. I'm helping other people. I'm not, the focus is not as much on me. It's now on how can I help the other?
Yep. There's a bunch of places in the AA Big Book where when you're running into a problem, and it'll outline this problem or this problem or this problem, and almost every
Mhm.
single time, part of the answer is to turn my thoughts to where I might be helpful. Who can I
Mhm.
help? And I even
Yep.
joke around sometimes. Sometimes I use that tool when I see the lady across the street struggling to get her recycle bins in. Oh,
Yep.
that's somebody I can help. And
There
it
you
doesn't
go.
have to be the big help, the big
No.
capital H help, to just be out here, and you do that and boom, you come back in the house and it's almost like, what was I thinking about? Well, never mind. It disappears.
Exactly.
And another cool thing, and it goes to this more evidence on this thing, is that as I pray, I God's got to help me help these other people. I'm not actually capable of doing that. I'm a vessel down here, and
Yeah.
I get my power through that. And
Hmm.
but where I'm going with that, so there'll be times that words will come out of my mouth that I don't have any idea where they come from on some advice to somebody that it's like, and
Oh,
they're like, wow, yeah, that really,
I
and
knew
you think
exactly
and you
what they
go,
needed.
golly, I didn't really like, I didn't process that out of my brain.
Oh goodness, I know what that is. I mean, ju just writing the book. I mean, it is. There's times that I'm sitting there and I'm writing and I go back and I read and I go, okay, where did that come from? A- And it's just amazing. It's whenever you allow yourself. It goes back to that idea that we talked about previously of if you allow yourself to let go, if you allow yourself to let yourself go and not say that you have to define who you are, but you allow God to define who He has created you to be, and you step into that, it's amazing what what you will be able to do as you follow him.
Yeah, I remember being so exhausted and never feeling like I was like going to catch up or that I was going to, and the to-do list looked too big and all that. And I'm amazed today at the amount of stuff I'm doing, and I'm not exhausted at the end of the day.
Hmm.
I also be careful about that because again, this is just both edges, both sides of the coin. Nothing's black,
Yeah,
blah, blah. I also have to take some time to say, okay, Dan, you're going to do nothing today.
exactly.
But yeah, it does. There's an energy that comes into my life that you know makes me, I feel like I'm living a powerful life.
Hmm.
And I know that where that power is coming from. It really is. There were some things that and we just crested over an hour. I think I saw something about talking about some simple tools to get started stuff. I think it was maybe in the email that I received from somebody, and I'd said tools earlier.
Yeah.
I think we ought to
Well,
talk a little bit about that.
yeah, the biggest tool that we put into the book was that definition of identity, was those handles. Is whenever you ask someone to define identity and to transform identity, it's those um, four P's that really actually are the foundation of what we talk about. It's that principles, perspectives, purposes, and priorities. Because if you say someone that you need to transform, you need to change your identity, well, that's a huge thing. And it's something that you've been developing all throughout your entire life. Where do you even start? How do you even capture what that means? And so by identifying what the identity is created based on those four P's. Now we have a handle of if I need to change something, if I need to transform something, it starts with those four P's. Do I need to transform just a belief? So let me just walk through the four P's a little bit. The principles are truths. What do I believe is true? How do I define things? Um, and then from that definition of truth, we can create our perspectives. How do we interpret things? How do we see things? So, an example that I used with a couple of guys earlier is this definition of how do you define good? It seems like a very simple word, but if you had to define good,
Hmm.
it's a much more challenging thing to define. And I actually did an exercise with them where I showed them that each of their individual definitions of good were one, very subjective, different for each person, and they were also very self-focused.
Hmm.
They defined good based on how they viewed what was good or what was not good. And so it was very different for each person. And so if we see something as good, it's going to be something that we're going to be attracted towards. But if we can change that definition, transform that principle of what does it mean for something to be good versus not good, it can change the perspective of how we see things. So something like you said earlier about addiction is that most of the time people see the addiction, the thing that they're doing, whether it's the feeling that they get from that or the comfort that they have from doing it or the history or something like that, there's something good that they're chasing. But if they can change that definition, that principle of what is good, then whenever they come into a circumstance where they see that, that perception, their interpretation of that is changed. And so
Hmm.
they now have a new perspective of what that means. So that's the first two P's. But then the third is purpose, which is motivation. It's what gets you up in the morning? What are you living for? What drives you? Because that's what motivates us. That's what gets us doing, moving towards action. You said something whenever you got down to the very bare bottom with the at home imprisonment situation. But you had a purpose. Your kids, you were living to provide and to take care and to raise your kids and to help them, and that by taking all of those other things away, it really narrowed your purpose.
Hmm.
and helped you focus on what was really important. And then the last one is priorities, which is what are the things, going back to your statement, it's like, what do you say is important to you? But not just saying it, what really is important to you, because that's how you make decisions. We're going to make decisions based on our priorities. So if you tell me that this is your top priority, that is the thing that I'm going to be expecting, I'm going to be seeing you make decisions to follow after more than anything else. So as we're transforming our identity, the question is as we're seeing things that need to be changed, that need to that discontinue this discontinuity that we talked about at the very beginning of the conversation, is that discontinuity a principle? Is it a purpose? Is it a perspective, or is it a priority?
Hmm.
Classify it. Which one is it? And then once you've identified, it's kind of that writing down thing that you said earlier. It kind of all knits together, because once you've identified, is it one of those things, then you can start saying, it's like, okay, so if that is the thing that needs to be changed, if what I'm really struggling with is an incorrect principle, an incorrect belief, an incorrect truth, what is the truth that it needs to be substituted with? And so that's really the main tool that the book really walks people through, is this idea of understanding identity from those four P's, and how those four P's can really help individuals through this iterative process of transformation and becoming who we were supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it's baby steps. Everything is baby steps. It's the only
Yeah,
way to do how do you eat elephant one bite at a time.
I've
Get the
used that
ball
so many
rolling.
times,
Yeah.
and
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 that's the
that's the
other thing,
idea.
it's one of the sometimes things seem to be insurmountable. The mountain looks too tall,
Mhm.
and reminding people that, no, you just the old that starts with one step, get the ball moving. There's momentum that comes with it. I coach that all the time in the 12 steps. Well,
Absolutely.
don't, a guy gets rolling, don't lose this momentum because it is
Right.
terribly difficult to get back.
Oh, absolutely.
And I see it all the time. I'm speaking from experience, but get the ball rolling and then continue the
Yeah.
journey. Continue. That's another word that's used all over the big book. Continue, continue, continue,
Right.
continue, continue.
A- And that's the thing that we talk about, is it's this consistent focus on those four P's. It gives us a handle on what needs to be changed. So we're not saying I need to change everything about me, because if someone gets that mentality, it's impossible. They're never going to do it. But if you can say, do you know what? Let's just look at a perspective that you have. What is a perspective? How do you see this thing? Tell me about that. That's the thing that seems to be a hang up, where you're constantly struggling. You're seeing maybe a way of interpreting or seeing other people, or it may just be a way that you're seeing yourself. And let's just start there.
Yeah.
And let's work on that perspective that needs to be let go of, so it can be replaced with a true perspective. And then once we get that perspective, we now have, like you said, that momentum. Okay, what's the next thing that we need to work on? It may be, because you have a new perspective now, maybe we need to start working on a purpose. Or maybe we need to go backwards, and we need to see what was the foundation, what was the truth that you were believing that was leading to that perspective that needs to be changed.
Yeah. Yep. Makes a ton of sense. I always, it seems that there's just a big bag of tools and it really could be boiled down to the same thing. And but people need a different set of tools for different things, even though the principles
Mhm.
are pretty much all in alignment, like the 12-step
Mhm.
tools are not out of alignment with what you're talking about, right? And
No.
vice versa, that's all in alignment of these tools and of how they work. And that's why I like sharing all the different tools because for some reason, these unique human beings that God made, one
Mhm.
set of tools. I like a crescent wrench and you like a screwdriver, and I don't, I don't, why, uh, why that works. And it's not exactly correct, but we're built one set of tools will work for somebody they can get their mind wrapped around it for whatever reason, and another set they just can't do that with. I'm a yoga teacher too. I don't actually practice, but I've been trained, and uh, compass is used a lot as far as like getting my compass needle pointed in my direction, and that works in all
Mhm.
kinds of ways. You can't just sail across the ocean. It's a bunch of navigation is point to point to point, small points in
Right.
the right direction, ends up with this
Yep.
kind of crooked line. And I like that analogy for life too. I kind of have to,
Hmm.
this is like setting your compass on my compass needle on this little piece of what's not working. And I'll walk towards that point. And when I get to that point, I'll take a new bearing
Hmm.
and walk to the next point. And you don't, when you drive down the road, you're constantly making course correction.
Hmm.
I like that parallel for life is that way for me too. It's a little course correction, and I got to keep my eye on the next little spot down the road because
Yep.
way down the road is too far for me to absorb. It's too much,
Yep.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
And
you can pick up different teachers and you run into different people as you get to these other signposts and these other points,
Mhm.
and it seems to be that God throws that teacher where you need it, and
Right.
and it shifts, and uh,
Yeah.
that picking the gold off again
Yeah. And I think
or the mud.
the thing I like about what we put in redeeming identity is, like you said, those minor corrections, those minor changes. And that's what redeeming identity really does, is it gives a handle of, as you're going through these little changes, what's the thing that needs to be changed? What's the thing that needs to be transformed? Is it that principle? Is it a perspective? It's like sailing. I mean, you said you talked sailing is a great idea. It's whenever you're sailing, there's different things on the sailboat that could be changed to change your direction. It could be the sail, it could be the rudder, it could be um the tacking. I don't know sailing too well, but I know enough of it that if I probably went out there, I'd get lost. But the idea is that to steer that ship in different ways as a sailboat, there's different tools, there's different things that can be changed to move you in the direction that you need to go.
Yeah,
And that's what redeeming identity is about. It's saying, okay, you can't just change your identity because it's too big, but what you can do is you can change a purpose. You can focus on just that, and that's going to move your direction from this direction to this direction. And then as you've made that change, that correction into closer to who you were meant to be, then the next thing could be that you need to change a principle. And it's another small change. And it's another small tack. And that's what redeeming identity does. It gives us a handle, an understanding of how do we go about this process
right.
of transformation in a way that's understandable and meaningful.
Yep. Some layout of tools on how to navigate this. Uh,
Hmm.
Kind of life is somewhat navigation.
It is
And you can't
definitely.
take that sailboat will not do a U-turn.
No,
It
it
won't.
does not.
You're gonna have to bend it around the corner,
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah. Hey, I love knocking this stuff around and talking to people. And like I said in the beginning, maybe I said it or whatever, the folks that are shining their light. It's just I say, if you keep your eyes in certain directions, can look pretty dark. But, over and over again, I'm meeting people who are carrying light and forces for the good on this podcast. And I try to do my part of my mission, part of my purpose today is to help illuminate this stuff. I want to do the
Great.
imposter syndrome thing and fight that off of going, who am I to be? But it seems that it feels like an assignment and a mission that's been given to me, and I learned to say yes today to those missions rather than put them in a closet and wonder about them. So thanks for being part of my mission. I always say, the other thing is that you got to participate in this stuff. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It takes action, and you have to get up on off the couch. And a friend of mine told me, you must participate in your own recovery, uh,
Yep.
and whatever that is, it's going to take a little bit of work. But I can promise you, I can guarantee you that. once you start doing that, you will be happy that you did it. I hear
Oh,
over and over and over, particularly in the 12-step world, people go, "Wish I'd started this earlier." Well, the old thing about when's the best, if you want an oak tree, when's the best time to plant an acorn? 200 years ago, when's the next best time? Today.
yep,
So begin to plant your acorn today and become who, basically, frankly, who God meant you to be. Because I think that's our real
absolutely.
purpose in life. Ultimately, that is the purpose.
That is, well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and letting people come out and share the tools, as you said, that can help them get move in that direction. And thank you for letting me be here talking about redeeming identity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to finish the rest of it.
Excellent.
So,
Well, as you're finishing, if you ever have any questions or if you want to continue the conversation, let me know. I'd love to continue. I love chatting with people who are really trying to help people.
yeah, me too. Me too. All right. Well, have a great rest of your Saturday. And that won't mean anything to people who are listening, but I was like, my favorite yoga teacher says, have a great day on purpose.